All right. How you doing, John?
Hey, I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
Excellent. So this is the initial recording of Lionhead Forge, part of Lionhead Ministries. So excited to kick this thing off and kind of see where it goes. So we're going to do a little interview today with John VanHouten, so founding member of Lionhead Ministries and engineer extraordinaire. So we'll have a little question and answer session and kind of see where the whole thing takes us and um, learn more about you and your life and your walk with Christ and how that's impacted your personal professional life. So we'll go ahead and open it up with the first question is just tell us a little bit about your background, where you come from, what you do for work, and a little bit about your faith.
Yeah, so I do have to make a slight correction. I am not the engineer extraordinaire.
That's right.
I like to think of me more as an engineer whisperer, where I can understand engineering and engineers and help them communicate with the real world. So, so about me. Well, I grew up in South Florida, um, kind of close to the beach. So that was fun. Pretty good. Family life. Folks went to church. We went to Baptist church. We actually went to a church called Bible Town in Boca Raton, which was always fun, having that name. But, to me, faith was always like, okay, yes, I definitely don't want to go to hell. So it's more of
Right.
an insurance policy. Like, yep. I remember walking the aisle when I was like 7, when they do an altar call. And it's like, yeah, that sounds good to me. But, I never really knew what it meant to be a believer or to have faith, right? It was like I always thought it was more of a mental model of, okay, I'm choosing this, but choosing and doing are two different things.
Right. Kind of like an add-on to your life.
Yeah. Yeah. So I ended up going to college in Texas, to Baylor University. It was actually interesting. I did not want to go to Baylor. In fact, I wanted to go to Florida State or University of Florida, where my girlfriend at the time was going.
Nice.
And so I had applied to the Florida schools, got into them all. And my folks are like, "Hey, we really want you to think about Baylor." And I'm like, "Texas? I don't want to go to Texas. I mean, Florida." Anyway, so it was like the night before, you had to put your deposit in or you lose your dorm slot.
Right.
And I'm like, "Nope, University of Florida is where I'm going. That's how it is." My mom was like, "Hey, why don't you just pray about it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, what's that going to do?" But I did. I remember laying there in my bed praying, said, "Okay, Lord, I got to make a decision in the morning. Whatever." Went to sleep, woke up the next morning. It was weird. I just knew. I was like, I'm supposed to go to Baylor. And I'm like, what? So I'm getting up. I go downstairs. My mom's drinking her coffee. And she's like, so did you decide? And I'm like, yeah, I'm supposed to go to Baylor. And she was like, that's awesome. I'm like, okay, I don't know, whatever.
Interesting. Why Baylor? Why
Well,
did she?
my folks wanted me to go to a Christian school because
Okay.
they thought that it would be healthy and good for me. They were kind of very, I wouldn't say concerned, but they wanted to make sure I was in the right environment.
Gotcha.
The fallacy of control that we often have as parents or adults. And so Baylor, right, it was the largest Baptist university at the time. This was back in 1990. And so, yeah, never seen it, didn't know anything about it, didn't know anything really about Texas except, Texas is cool, right? Cowboys and stuff.
Sure.
Got on a plane. My dad flew out to Dallas. We drove down, from the DFW airport to Waco. And I remember the first thing getting out of the car and like this hot, dry wind with like
Oh yeah.
sand hits me in the face. And I'm like, what is this? Like this, there's a grit in the air. It was like a hair dryer being like, sprayed on you. Cause I was used to the sea breeze, right? Which is super
Right.
humid, always wet, wet down in Florida. But, I knew, once I stepped on campus, I was like, yeah, I'm supposed to be here. And I'm like, okay, dad, take off. See ya. And, so yeah, I started out there. Um, so you're asking me about like my engineering skills. So I kind of
Right.
jumped ahead to the school. Well, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went in doing pre-med biology and, did that. My dad's now he's a retired orthopedic surgeon. And, I remember going through the biology classes and realizing I didn't really like biology. And I really think what got me was I decided I didn't like people enough to want to fix them for a living. And I don't know if it was like the inner engineer that was in me, kind of like, people bad,
Oh, yeah.
introvert, whatever. And so I struggled through a semester of that. Then I decided, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a history major because I was doing really good in this history class. And then I started thinking, I was like, what the heck am I going to do with a history degree? No offense to anyone who has history degrees. We need you guys, but if there's a zombie apocalypse, I'm so sorry. We'll eat you first. And so, anyway, I did that for a little while. And then I was like, yeah, I was just kind of lost, right? Floundered a bit. I discovered freedom, like which is could be good, can
A good and
also
a bad thing for
and
18, 19-year-old.
yeah, it
Exactly.
could be a bad thing. I ended up really embracing the Texas culture, although since I was from Florida, actually, I don't like to tell people this. I was actually born in New Jersey, but I am not a
Oh,
Yankee. Born in New Jersey.
gotcha. Claim Florida.
That's right. My dad was in the army, so we were down at Fort Bragg. So when I was like 2 and 3, we were in Fort Bragg, and then we moved to South Florida when I was 3. So I call myself a Floridian, but
Gotcha. We'll
but
we'll delete that part. We won't include it in the podcast.
yeah, there. No, that's good. That's good. So, but yeah, didn't do real great in school because I didn't take it seriously. I have attention deficit disorder, and so taking my medicine was kind of key to help me. And I ended up meeting this girl, and she convinced me I didn't need to take my medicine. Well, that was a mistake.
Yeah.
So I had a year of repeating classes. In fact, I got put on academic probation because of my grades one semester, but kind of lost track what the question was.
So no, we were there. We were just through the introduction talking about your. I called you an engineer extraordinaire, and then we dove into the uh, into your background, and that's essentially what we're talking. Some of your
Sure.
background and diving into Baylor, and uh, you know where you went to school, and kind of a little more your path. How did you get to where you are? Um, as the chief engineer for all of aviation in the Army. Some of that path, I know you spent some time in Kuwait, had varying jobs, and some of that, we've talked in the past, and the audience isn't familiar necessarily with
Sure.
how you got to where you are, because so many times, especially for the younger generation, they look at us and they're like, "Hey, these guys are in these positions, and they must have just done all the right things." And so laying some of our background out of, it wasn't easy. We had difficult paths. We made a lot of mistakes, where you talked about, uh, repeating classes and being on academic probation. I got kicked out of school. I had to write a justification letter to get into my master's program due to my terrible GPA in my undergrad, of which it took me 6 years to get. And, funny, the parallels of your path up through college and mine are very there's similarities. I was actually an engineering major for my first semester, and quickly realized, I looked around the room, I said, "I can't work with these people. They're so detail oriented. They dive 10 miles deep on one simple subject." I'm like, it just kind of gets on my nerves. I can't work around these people for the rest of my life. And go figure, I end up working around engineers after my time in the Army pretty much consistently. So, but no, just yeah, just keep the conversation going about your
Yeah.
background and kind of how you got here.
Yeah. I think the background's a little bit important to give you the context of how I got to be where I am
Yep.
today. And so, talked about, when I was at school, kind of discovered that freedom, didn't know how to really use it properly, maybe abused it, got in some trouble with grades. That semester that my girlfriend at the time, convinced me to stop taking my medicine. That was really not a great one. She was from Texas A&M, so she was an Aggie, dyed in the red or maroon kind of Aggie.
Gotcha.
But she turned out to be really part of the story that I didn't realize, you know, that shaped my perception of myself. And so, when I got put on academic probation, my folks were like, "Hey, we're not going to pay for school if you're not going to take it seriously." And I was like, "Okay, so like you can come home and you get a job and work, or you can take us, a year and go to this Bible Institute upstate New York." Now, some background: my folks, have a house up in the Adirondacks and on Lake Pleasant up in New York near this big Christian camp called Camp of the Woods. And the Bible Institute was only about 53 miles. And I know that exactly from their house, right? So I'm like,
Yep.
coming home and working or going to this Bible Institute, it's in the middle of the Adirondacks. I think I'll do that. So that was like my sophomore year. So I say, sure. So I pack up all my stuff. I drive up there. I'm 20 at the time. And I did not realize what I was in for, um, partially because I was still rebelling in my heart. I still had a lot of my own flesh patterns. And I thought, hey, this is going to be an easy year. And so, I mean, it was really good biblical teaching. The way it worked there is they had a huge auditorium and there's all these cabins because we're in the middle of the mountains, right? And everyone gets assigned a job or a duty while you're there, depending on what your skills are. And we all had the same class at the same time. So it'd be like 500 of us in this auditorium, and we'd have like Old Testament, right, for like 2 hours. And it would be like Dr. Charles Ryrie was coming in. He'd come in and teach it, right?
Right.
And we'd have, apologetics, and it'd be another huge, apologetics, biblical scholar.
It's a massive culture change
Yeah,
from
it
Baylor.
was. And, but it was super legalistic.
Oh,
Super legalistic. I mean, you get demerits for everything. Like we had to wake up at 5:30 in the morning, make our bed. Then we had to sit down. A bell would ring in our little cabin, and it was really a cabin, right? And we'd have to sit and do our quiet time. And so there was like these pre-questions that you had to read a verse and fill out your stuff.
very regimented.
Oh, very.
Bible college boot camp.
Oh, it was. And there was there's tons of rules. And so, for instance, like you couldn't ever leave campus, without special permission from the dean. So you had to fill out a permission slip. You signed a covenant saying you weren't going to listen to the radio, watch a movie, smoke or drink, or uh, enjoy the company of the opposite sex for the whole year that you were
So
there.
what church was this affiliated, just out of curiosity? Because it sounds a lot like the church I grew up in.
Well, I'm not sure if it's Baptist, but I don't know
Okay.
exactly if there was a church because they kind of had their own church. They had a huge Christian ministry and missionary complex up in the Adirondacks. Now happen to have this Bible Institute, and they were all about missions, right? They were all about
Right.
reaching out to inner city kids. Like during the winter, they'd have this thing called snow camp where they would invite folks in, from the inner city. They'd bust kids in, and since we're up in the mountains, right, we'd had snow and we had snowmobiles, and everything is about like evangelism, like you know, reaching kids,
Right.
bringing them to Christ. But it was super legalistic. So I'm there, right? I'm 20, about to turn 21, and I'm getting demerits. Like I got a demerit for not filling out my quiet time properly, which I was like, what? Like, this is between me and God. You're like reading my quiet time. You didn't like the answer that I thought about that verse. So passive aggressive John. And this goes to the bigger story
Sure.
of how I'm become an engineer. Um, I was, I guess, a little bit rebellious. So I would start writing in an unintelligible script. And when questioned about it, the kind of smartass I was, well, that's my prayer language. If you don't understand it, then you haven't been
You don't
given
have
the
the
gift
Holy
of
Spirit.
the Holy Right. Well, of course, that did not go well. So
Right.
anyway, tons and tons of demerits. Um, I would get demerits for not taking notes during class. I'm like, dude, why am I getting demerits for not taking? Well, you're not paying attention. I'm like, I am listening, but I'm
I have a photographic memory. Don't worry about
well.
it.
And so, but what it was about legalism. And I remember getting in trouble. So if you're getting a certain number of demerits, they put you on mandatory. They called it work duty, which was kind of like detention.
Sure.
And so you got assigned to a maintenance crew. Well, because I had a computer background, my assigned job was, time card entry because everyone had a job, it was all volunteer labor, but I
Right.
put in all the hours, right? So mine was super cush. But they're like, we're going to assign you the maintenance duty. I'm like, maintenance duty? What's that? They're like, well, you're going to go split wood and you're going to go paint stuff. So I'm out there with the maintenance crew and they loved it. And they were like, they matched people very well.
Yeah.
But that was not a good match for the maintenance. So I'm sitting there painting this cabin, and I hate painting. Now the Lord has healed me of hating painting, but I'm painting this cabin, and I remember talking to this other guy, and he was a good dude. And I said, I used to really love serving Jesus, but man, here it's like it's so forced. And then he's like, yeah, well,
Comes that checklist.
that's how it is. Well, fast forward, apparently I was painting cabins too good and it was supposed to be a punishment. So I get reassigned to another, duty for discipline, which was they had a big warehouse that they were making for their maintenance vehicles. So they assigned me to pipe fitting. I'm like, I don't know anything about pipe fitting. And they're like, oh, we'll teach you how to do it. So I met this dude and he's showing me how to thread pipes and I'm doing like HVAC stuff. And I'm like, this is pretty fun, right? And learning the new skill. And I start, doing pretty good at it. And then what I didn't realize at the time was the Institute was asking all these crew leaders, like, was I becoming contrite? Was I, you know, um,
Becoming compliant.
compliant? So they would check up on us, right? So they'd ask the maintenance leaders, hey, is he becoming remorseful? Is he repenting, right? And I didn't know this stuff. And so it turns out I was doing pretty good at pipe threading. And since I was enjoying it, that was not a punishment. So I get reassigned the next week to a different crew. And so I got reassigned to log splitting,
Oof.
which was kind of cool because I got to learn how to use hydraulic equipment, right? They had this monster, like
Oh yeah.
almost factory thing where you put like a 4-foot section of log and it like splits, chops it, splits it,
Right.
and you stack it. So I do that. Next week I get reassigned into into helping with the head chef. And so on this,
You're
institute,
becoming quite the Renaissance man at this
right?
point.
So I'm like, what's going on? Why do I keep getting reassigned? Well, anyway, they assigned me this head chef to help in the kitchen, right? So we'd all have breakfast at the same time, right? We'd all have lunch and we'd have dinner. And dinners, we had to wear suits. Like it was like a
Oh,
formal
wow.
event. I mean, it was like really conservative and strict. And so I remember telling the head chef, his name was Ernie. I said, hey, bro, I'm pretty sure that this is supposed to be a punishment. And at some point, they're going to ask you if I'm doing good. And if you tell them I like it or I'm doing good, they're going to reassign me. So if you actually want to keep me, you just need to tell them. He's like, no, they're not like that. No, they're not punitive like that. I'm like, okay, whatever. So 2 weeks go by. I'm learning how to make like institutional size mashed potatoes for like
Right.
500 people. And I'm learning this is good.
Feed the troops.
Well, sure enough, the assignments come out and I am now reassigned to dish pit. And I'm like, yep. So I'm in the dish pit. Now that one sucked.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was like 5 a.m. You're cleaning the dishes, right? Because the kitchen crew had been working, and I could not get out of that one. I mean, it was like it sucked.
They found the punishment.
They found
that
the
fit
punishment.
their perception of the crime.
They found the punishment, and so I called my uncle, who's a Baptist pastor in the Catskills in New York, and he's got a little rebellious streak too. So I called my uncle Jim. I'm like, hey. And he goes, it needs to become something where it's not worth it for them to keep you in the dish pit. I'm like, okay. Well, I became very clumsy. I started dropping trays of glasses. It only took me about 4 cases before they realized that was not going to work for them anymore.
It's not financially responsible
Yeah.
to keep you back there.
So I feel bad saying it now, looking back, but I was a jerk. I mean, I was just like one of these little bratty jerks.
Entry level to psychological operations against your perceived enemy at the time.
Yeah. So now it's wintertime, so it's cold, right? And they assigned me to snowmobile repair. Which is, pretty cool. And it was like this big, like Hagrid looking dude from Harry Potter. Everyone was scared of him. His name was Stu. I mean, monster dude. And he was the mechanic, right? Ran the whole snowmobile thing. And so I come up to him and say, hey, I'm assigned to you. And he's like, you're the troublemaker. And I'm like, oh, they told you. Okay, cool.
Your reputation.
Yeah, it's like, that's awesome. And so anyway, he started showing me how to do snowmobile repair. Well, the cool thing is, since my grandparents lived at that cabin over at Lake Pleasant, they had a Skidoo Blizzard 5500 snowmobile. And I'm like, hey, Gramps, can I bring that up to the Institute? And he's like, yeah, sure. So I brought my snowmobile over, right? So I had my own snowmobile, right? So I'm working with on the weekends I'm outside and I remember it was like negative 10 degrees. Like kids are out there running around in these old snowmobiles and I'm standing there, but I'm learning how to do repair. And at one point I tell Stu, I was like, this is a punishment. If I'm any good, if I'm having fun doing this, they're going to ask you and then they're going to reassign me. And he goes, well, I'm not going to lie. And he goes, you're doing really good. And I really appreciate what you're doing. And I was like, well, I'm just letting you know how it's going to go.
Yeah.
Well, later that week, I was rebuilding, a carburetor on one of the machines and gas leaked out and accidentally caught the snowmobile on fire.
Ooh.
it got it put out pretty quick, I was like, I was all embarrassed. Well, anyway, week goes by, I go to the permanent assignment sheet to see, and my permanent assignment is snowmobile repair. I'm like, what is going on? So I go up and I say, Stu, I said, I'm assigned to you permanently. He goes, yep. And I go, well, did you tell him I sucked? And he goes, no. And I said, well, what'd you say? And they asked how you were doing. And if I, wanted to keep you. And all I told them was, well, what do you think? You set the shop on fire.
He didn't lie.
Right. He didn't lie. Right. So, but it was interesting because it turned out like he was a really nice man. He was a lonely man. He was much like a lot like most of us, where we're a big burly or we're tough exterior and we hold our emotions inside.
Oh yeah.
Right. And we tend to put on a front, but we're actually hurting inside. Right.
That's right.
There's a void there. And so I got kicked out from the Bible Institute a week before I graduated
Oh, nice.
for telling the truth about stuff I won't get into.
Sure.
But I remember it really impacting me. We have this message of, there's grace, his blood covers all sins,
Grace, forgiveness.
forgiveness.
That's one of the things I was going to ask you real quick. Did they teach the love of Jesus Christ in that school, or was it mainly focused on the rules and the laws and, the things that the works you're supposed to do, which we know works come out of love for Jesus, the fact that he died on the cross and saved us. It's like, it's not and, it's because of. But did they teach that, or did you? Because early on, the legalistic church that I grew up in, there was no love of Jesus Christ taught. It was much more, you do these things or else, very judgment based type of thing. So I'm just curious how your experience was.
So it's interesting. So it was very biblically based teaching, like
Yep.
Old Testament,
I had the
New
same.
Testament. So for those who attended the university, it was about obedience.
Yep.
Are you being good? Are you following the rules? We had mandatory outings where they would put us into a van, drive us down to Albany, and we were supposed to do open air canvassing or witnessing, whatever you want to call it, sharing the gospel.
Right.
And they would teach us these really stupid things. Like they give us all these tracts, little pieces of paper that say like the Romans road to heaven, blah, blah, blah. You don't want to go to hell. Or they would teach us like rope tricks, like you have a knot and you're untying the knot and you're showing that there's a bridge between you and God. Or
Sure.
we'd have to paint something that, it was like looking back at it, I'm like, yeah, no one cared.
That ain't gonna get it.
So it was really weird. It was two sides of the coin. So they were teaching us obedience and conformance, but they were saying, hey, Jesus loves you. You could be redeemed. But I didn't feel redeemed there.
Right.
And so one of the trips that I was, asked, not asked, I was told, okay, you're going to Albany to do this open air canvassing. It was a Grateful Dead concert back when the Grateful Dead were still all together and alive. Yeah. And so growing up in South Florida, shame on me. I knew of the Grateful Dead,
Yeah.
but I wasn't like a Deadhead. So I was not prepared for the crew of people who follow the Dead, right?
Oh yeah, I had a chemistry teacher in high school that was a Deadhead for a few years.
Oh yeah,
they're interesting.
And so I remember like people, I call them hippies now, whatever. Like, hey, I need a miracle. I'm like, I got a miracle right here. And then I go to witness with them and they're looking at me and they're like licking the tract, thinking it's like got LSD or something
That's
on
right.
it. And I'm like, what are you doing? They're like, well, I thought this was, I'm like, no, it's not drugs. Sorry.
Yeah.
But going back to your question, no, it was very legalistic and it really scarred me. So when I got, kicked out or dismissed, it was me and like two other folks got dismissed. And as I'm driving to, my grandparents' cabin, I see one of the other dudes who's kicked out hitchhiking. We're up in upstate New York in the middle of nowhere. So I pull over and I'm like, hey man, get in the car. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, my parents won't take me. Now, he lived in Connecticut. And I said, they won't take you. Yeah, I got kicked out, and they won't let me come home. I'm like, okay, come with me. So we go over to the lake house for a couple days and I get him straightened out. I drive him home and I talked to his folks and go, hey, he didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
He just broke some rules. And honestly, the rules are stupid, and so your son isn't bad. And they're like, okay. And so anyway, I ended up driving back down to Florida and I had a lot of time to think because I'm like, man, I got, suspended from Baylor. This is my,
How old are you at this point?
so I'm 21. I turned 21 when I was there, which was hard, right? Because I had signed this pledge not to drink
Sure.
or smoke. And I was kind of a smoker when I got there.
Oh, yeah.
And, I had been known to imbibe.
So it's about 98 time frame?
No,
95?
this was 92.
92. Okay.
Yeah, 92. But my parents were cool about it. I mean, I just told them, hey, here's what happened. And they're like, you didn't do anything wrong. You told the truth about some things, but it sat on me. Anyway, I go back to Baylor and I'm like, okay, I got to get buckled down.
Yep.
So I'm taking the classes. I finally discovered computer science and realized, hey, this is kind of cool. I've always liked computers, growing up down in South Florida. IBM had their headquarters in Boca Raton. So I got to meet some of the early computer scientists and work on their equipment instead of doing Boy Scouts. They had the IBM Explorer Scouts, which was actually a branch of the Boy Scouts, but it was called Explorer.
Okay.
And so for 3 hours a week, I would go to the IBM campus. This is back in high school, and learn how to program the mainframes or their industrial robotics. Because back then, we actually made all of our computers in the U.S. in their facilities, right?
Sure.
So anyway, fast forward back to college, I realized that that girl from Texas A&M was not good for me, and so I started trying to do my schoolwork. I got better at my school, but I kind of just messed up. I didn't really take it seriously, but I was making progress towards computer science. And then I met my now wife, and she was amazing. She had already graduated from University of Texas. She was a cute blonde.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, yeah. And I'm like in my third senior year at this point.
Helps give you a little focus.
Yeah. And, but I had never met someone who was so open and honest. Now, she didn't know the Lord at this time.
Okay.
But I was just like, man, this person, I need to get my stuff together. So I buckled down, ended up, I had to pass this one operating systems class to graduate. And it was like a nail biter. Like, we're down to the wire. So and we were going to get married the day after I graduated. So I was like going in, I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm graduating. And she's like, yeah, you need to do it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I ended up passing the class, graduating, getting married the next day, immediately went to work for Motorola as a contractor about a month before I graduated down at Fort Hood. I was working. But I say this is because I stepped up to the plate because I knew it was time to be a man, but I didn't know what being a man meant.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so when I got that first job, I really was like, okay, I'm not going to mess up my marriage. I'm not going to mess up this job. I am going to work. But I felt that I was a fraud because I never felt good enough. So this goes back into my backstory. I didn't realize that I was kind of a performance-based acceptance person, meaning I felt that my worth was based on my performance.
Your output.
Not only with people, but with God. That I wasn't good enough, so God wasn't going to bless me.
There's a lot of people living like that right now.
Right? I messed up and struggled with things, and that would alienate me from people maybe, but from God, right? I wasn't worthy. And so I wasn't going to mess up this job. I wasn't going to mess up my marriage. So
You're right.
I just dove in, and I worked like 60-hour weeks, just to make sure. It was kind of funny when they interviewed me for the job. I drove down to Fort Hood, which is about 70 miles away from Waco. And I buy a suit because I didn't have a suit. So I go down for the interview, and they're interviewing me for this software engineering position on this new tactical system called the Tactical Airspace Integration System. It was Army's air traffic control, airspace planning.
Yep.
I have no idea what they're talking about, right? And there's like, the head lady is interviewing me, and there's the other dude, and they're asking me these questions. Well, at school, I took an interview class, and they're like, okay, when you get your job interview, there's 3 major rules, right? You never say no to anything. Like whatever they ask you, never say no. Always yes, you can do it. You never tell them how much you want. You never discuss it. Just don't go there. And what was the other thing? Yeah, so those are the main 2 rules. I can't remember the third one. But anyway, so we're sitting in an interview, and they're going through my resume, and I had, the crappy college resume. Here's the classes I took, and I'm a bartender
in
too.
this society, and here's some achievements.
Yeah. Did not have my GPA on there because, we just didn't need that.
I've never put my GPA on a resume.
So
Nobody wants to see that.
So then they're asking me, they're like, okay, so this is a software engineering position for this system, blah, blah, blah. How do you feel about that? And I go, oh, well, I don't really like software. And I'm like, I hear myself saying this.
Whoops.
I'm interviewing for a software position. I'm a computer science major, and I'm telling them I don't like software. And they look at me like kind of strange. And I'm like, oh, well, but that's my degrees in commercial application programming, so, I mean, if you want me to write software, I could do that, but, it's really not what I like. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? Right. So they write it down, and then they're talking some more, and they're like, okay, so how much do you need to make? And in my mind, I'm like, don't say anything.
It's negotiable.
Don't say anything. And I'm like, well, I need $30,000 a year. Because I was bartending and I was making about 25, and I'm like, I'll give myself a little bump. And they write it down. I'm like, oh, great. I just priced myself out. I just violated the second rule. So I told them I didn't like software. I gave them a number, and then they're talking. They're like, well, would you like to go on post to see the lab and kind of see this tactical system? And I'm like, well, yeah, how long would that take? And they're like, we were off post for the interview.
Right.
I'm like, oh, it'll be about 45 minutes. And I look at my watch. I'm like, I can't do that. In fact, I need to leave in the next 10 minutes because I got a bar shift at Forge. It's going to take me about an hour to get back to Waco. And they just looked at me and wrote it down. And
they're like, this isn't his priority, right?
And I'm like, look, I can't bail on them because they won't be able to find someone. So I'm sorry. They're like, okay, thank you. And then they dismissed me. So now I have this shame, right? Like, okay, I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
Why did I say these things? So the whole ride home, I'm thinking, oh, you replay it.
The mental beat down.
Right. And so, which fed my inner self of thinking I was a failure anyway. So of course I didn't do good in this interview. Well, several weeks go by, I hear nothing. I'm like, yeah, I blew this interview thing. Well, I get a call back. And they're like, hey, we'd like to interview you again. I'm like, you would? They're like, they start laughing. And they're like, yeah, we want you to meet the site manager. And I said, okay. And then I said, well, do I need to wear a suit? And they're like, what? And I'm like, do I need to wear a suit? Because I only have the one and I don't want to buy another one. And they start laughing like, now you can wear business casual. I'm like, silence. And they're like, do you have a polo shirt and khaki pants?
Like, what is that?
And I'm like, yes. I'm like, wear that. So anyway, now I'm ready, man. I drive down. I love software. It's so good. I got my resume of Unix, Solaris, shell script C.
Geeking it out.
Assembly language is my love language, right? So I give the resume to the guy. He's looking at it and he goes, you're a bartender. I said, yep. He goes, I was a bartender too. And he goes, how do you make a margarita? And I said, well, I put a little orange juice in mine. He goes, yeah, the orange juice is really what makes it. Most people don't do it. And I'm like, okay, you like beer? And I say, yeah, I brew my own beer. And he goes, you brew beer? You want to go get a beer right now? And I'm like, this is the weirdest interview I've ever had. Well, anyway, they hire me. So I'm like, holy smokes, I'm hired. And I still haven't graduated. I got like a month left. And they assigned me this task. They put me in the lab in the trailer, on middle of Fort Hood, right? There's tanks and stuff all around.
Biggest military installation on the United States.
Yeah. So I'm all like, I got this badge. I don't have a security clearance yet or anything like that. But I'm like, okay. So I'm
hot stuff, right?
But my operating systems professor, the one that, was like the key to me actually graduating and being able to have so he's like, so what does it feel like to work for the defense, industrial complex, knowing that you're killing people? And I remember sitting there in class.
It's like it's airspace management, man. It's not launching rockets.
I see it more as protecting our nation. So it was weird, right? Yeah. But anyway, they assigned me this task to load the software on the system. They gave me this book and like 15 DVDs, and there's like a Unix Solaris machine. Yeah. I'm like, load it up, follow the instructions, mark up what doesn't work so we can get it, working.
Right.
I don't see anyone for the next 3 weeks. I had class in the morning, so I go from class to 8 until like 11, drive down to Fort Hood, get there about 1, work until 7 at night, drive home, do my homework, repeat, right?
Ooh, that's a grind.
So I get this thing working, right? And it was a software for this tactical system, and I can't find anyone. I'm like, okay. So I'm like wandering buildings,
Oh
looking
yeah,
for.
that's always a good idea.
And when I find, the supervisor, he's like surprised to see me, and I'm like, hey, I got it working, and he's like, what? That thing they forgot they hired me. Number one. Right? And so like, "Oh, okay." And then they're like, "You got what working? You told me to get this software
They're
working."
like, "Who are you again?"
Exactly, right? So I'm
Yeah,
feeling, "Okay, this is great. I'm feeling validated here."
that's
Anyway,
right. I'm not even rememberable.
so anyway, I bring them into the lab, and they're like looking at me like incredulous, like I'm like, "It works now." And they're like, "Okay, show me." And they log in, it was working. And they're like, "Well, it turns out the software engineers for Motorola who developed it back in Scottsdale, Arizona, they couldn't get that build to work." And so they were surprised that I got it to work. So anyway,
This college kid they forgot about they hired,
right.
shoved in a trailer.
So what then happened was, you know, I'm working really hard, working hard hours, and I'm thinking it's the right thing to do. And I'm starting to sacrifice my relationship with my wife because I'm like, hey, I'm not going to get fired from this thing. And so I ended up going on many an exercise. And so, for instance, we would go to the field, and it was a new tactical system. I was like one of the only support people,
Right.
right, teaching the Army how to use it. So a year goes by, my wife becomes pregnant, 9/11 happens, I'm in the field, then I get deployed to, I go to Korea, and I go to Germany, and I go to France, and I go to, like, all kinds of installations, and then I'm like, I go to Iraq, as a civilian, right?
So what year is this?
So this is 2003.
Okay.
Yeah, Saddam's still in loose, right?
Yep.
Still,
I was in basic training.
yeah. And so I'm all over, Iraq trying to keep the system working.
Right.
We had a base in Kuwait, so I'd fly into different places in Iraq, on military flights. But I didn't realize the toll it was taking on my wife.
Sure.
And so anyway, ended up coming back, had a little PTSD because I saw stuff, not as much as folks who really are in the fight, but shrapnel hit her Humvee one time. You know,
Yeah, you're in a combat zone.
Yeah.
There's no place to hide.
Yeah, first night, remember being in Balad.
Mortaritaville.
Yeah, it was Mortaritaville. First night, I'm in there, right? We're in a tent. We're with the air traffic control maintenance battalion. They let us stay with them. And 9 o'clock on the dot, there's explosions going off, right? And I'm looking around, and there's this little specialist female rolling up her laundry or something, calm as can be, and there's explosions going on. I'm like looking around, like, what's that? She's like, oh, it's just the mortars. I'm like,
Every day.
Should we do something? She just keeps rolling her stuff up, and she goes, well, if you're uncomfortable, you can go hide in the bunker. And so I look over at the government civilian I was with, and I remember thinking, I'm not turning my man card in.
No.
So I lay back down on the cot. I put my helmet on, and I remember praying, Lord, if it's my time to go,
Just let it hit me right.
let it be a direct hit.
Yeah.
And so I know I got off track on that one. But again, all of these things I was doing, I was working because I thought I had to be good enough.
Right.
And in my heart, I always felt I was never good enough. I was a failure.
How was your faith back then?
So back then, my faith was tenuous because I was a believer, but I didn't act like a believer.
Right.
And my wife was not a believer, right? I was not a very good example, for her. I mean, I smoked, I drank, wasn't, the best. And I remember one day she's like, hey, we need to go to church. And I'm like, uh-oh. And she's like, yeah, I think, now we have a kid coming, I think we should go to church. And I was like, okay. And she's like, yeah, I read about this church. It's at the fairgrounds. It kind of rotates. It's called Antioch Community Church. I think we should go to it. And now I'm panicking because I'm avoiding God, right? Because I'm not
Sure.
living like I should. I know who he is, right? And so we end up start going to church, and I'm thinking, okay. And in my mind, I felt that I somehow was disqualified from sharing Christ with her because I haven't lived that in my life with her.
Right.
And so I remember one night, I forgot where, Well, actually, if you hear it from her side, I think I was at Fort Bragg for like 30 days, and she was pregnant, waddled up the aisle when they did an altar call, and basically said, "Hey, if you're real, Jesus, I will choose you, but you got to change my situation. I can't have my husband gone anymore." And I don't know any of this has happened, right? So I come back, and she's like, "Yeah, I want to know about how to accept Christ." So I'm like, "Okay, well," I'm thinking, "Okay, I guess I'll share." She said, "No, no, no, you don't need to share anything with me. This is what I chose, and this is what I prayed." And I'm like, "Yeah, you just ask for
Yeah.
forgiveness and you put your faith in Him." She goes, "I also prayed that you're not going to travel anymore." And I'm like, "Okay." The next day, I get a call from Huntsville, and they're like, "Hey, would you like to move out here and become the software integration lead?" And I said, "Well, I have to travel anymore?" And they're like, "Nope." I'm like, "Okay." So wife prays
Oh, yeah.
in the background. Suddenly things change. Well, I still didn't get healed from my performance-based acceptance, right? So I come to Huntsville. I do really good, working long hours, right? Long hours. Um, Consistently getting the top engineer awards. Everyone thinks I'm amazing. I think I'm a fraud. That's why I'm working so hard, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, over time, it did take a toll on our marriage. And I got to a place where I had to really trust God. Like, is this real or not? And He'll bring you to that place,
Take you to a breaking point.
um, where if you don't, He'll bring you to a decision point where it's really real, right? So I remember I thought my marriage was falling apart. I was alone. I met this weird old dude from church who had pursued me for like 3 years. His name was Sandy
Oh, yeah.
Snow.
I've met Sandy.
Yeah, call him Christian Yoda. He looked like Yoda, didn't he?
Yeah,
I
he's
mean, he
a
was like
little
this
guy.
little guy.
What's funny about Sandy is when I first saw him at church, he looked like he was part of the staff. And he's wandering around and talking to everybody, and I was just like, "Man, who is this guy?" And the pastor would reference Sandy every so often, he'd wave or whatever, and I didn't really know him, but I just knew who he was, and I was like, "This is an interesting little guy." So,
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. So Sandy, he would walk up to me like on a Sunday and I didn't know him. And he'd
Oh,
look
yeah.
at me, get right into your personal space, like,
Well, close talker.
too close. And he'd look at you like this uncomfortable Yoda looking dude. And he'd say, "When the Lord looks at you, He is pleased. He smiles." And I'd be like, number one, you're a weirdo.
Yeah, get away
And
from
number
me.
two, there's no way that's true because He knows who I really am,
Sure.
right? I'm not worthy. So He pursued me. Well, when I was coming to this crisis of faith, and there was a time where I was actually considering ending it,
Right.
things had gotten that bad. So I ended up reaching out to Sandy and said, "Hey, I'm supposed to talk with you." I just called him out of the blue. Hadn't talked to him in like a year. He says, "Yeah, I've been waiting for your call." And I'm like, "Okay." So I meet him in this little town called Gurley at the
Yep.
El Coyote restaurant, Mexican place.
Oh, yeah, out on 72.
And he's already sitting in there. I get there and I sit down and he looks at me and he goes, "In third grade, a teacher said you weren't good enough. What was her name?" And I'm looking at him like, "What?" And I said the name of the teacher, like stuff I'd never shared with anybody.
Sure.
And he goes, "In college, a girl betrayed you. What was her name?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh." He was calling out like the innermost hurts. So I'm sitting there crying, thinking, is this dude like Jesus? How does he know these things? And he just said, "The Lord weeps with you. He knows you. He loves you, regardless of how you see yourself." And I was like, okay. And so it took time for me to believe Sandy, because again, I was feeling I was worthless, right? How could God love me the way Sandy said?
And
Right.
even when it's right in front of you and somebody's saying something that no one else could know,
Right.
you still doubt it.
Yeah.
You're just like, "No, that didn't just happen,"
Yeah.
you know?
So over time, um, I kind of got used to like apparently Sandy does hear from God. I had never heard from God. I was always told you read the Bible and you pray you're doing your part, maybe.
Right.
But I didn't realize that you can actually have a personal relationship with the Holy Spirit, with the Lord.
That's right.
And so I remember this one time, Sandy calls me up and he's like, "Hey, the Lord woke me up last night." I'm like, "He did?" And he's like, "Yep." He's got a word for you. Let's have lunch. I'm like, "Yes, finally." Because I'm in
Get the answer
crisis,
to
right?
everything.
I'm already, struggling with, do I need to exist anymore?
Right.
So I drive out to meet him and I'm like, "Okay, what is it?" And he goes, "Well, I don't know. He didn't tell me." I'm like, "What do you mean he didn't tell you?" He goes, "No, he just told me he had a word for you." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So, all right. So lunch is over. I'm driving back to Huntsville. So this was in Scottsboro, which was what, like 45 minutes away?
Yep.
And so I'm like, "Okay, Lord, I'm ready to receive thine word." And so, I'm driving. I turn on the Christian radio thinking that would help. Nothing, not hearing anything. And I'm getting closer to Huntsville. I'm like, "Okay, well, maybe I need to turn the radio off." And I'm like, "Okay, Lord, I'm now ready to receive your word because I'm desperate. Like I'm in crisis. You know, my
It's
wife
all
is,
unraveling.
it's all unraveling. Wife has already gone away with the kids. Wasn't sure she's coming back. And
So she's left at this point.
yeah.
Okay.
And so I'm like, I'm desperate, right? I'm like, I need. And so, but now I'm starting to worry. I'm like, what if he doesn't talk to me? What if it's not true? What if I'm not lovable? What if, So I decided
All the things
I'm going to take,
Satan wants you to feel.
right? So I'm going to take the long road home. So I take these back country roads and
I know exactly where you're driving.
yeah. And then I end up pulling over to this little country church in the middle of nowhere. Like, and I had a Jeep at the time. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, Lord, I'm just going to be quiet and listen. So I'm listening. I prayed. I hear nothing. I hear birds chirping and I fall asleep in my Jeep. I wake up sometime later, and as soon as I wake up, I hear the word Hebrews in my head. I've never heard or had a thought, I don't think, from the Lord prior to that, but I just hear Hebrews. And I'm like, well, okay. So I grab my Bible off the seat, open up to the book of Hebrews. I read the whole book out loud. And it's by faith they are saved. By faith they went
That's
through.
right.
They were called through faith. And then it talks about Jesus, from the high order, the high priest, how he tears the veil between us and heaven. So now we have direct access through him. Now we have a savior who hurts like we hurt, who grieves like we've grieved, who's experienced us, that is relatable, and how we are made whole through him. And I'm reading this, and I remember just crying and saying, Lord, said, it's okay if my situation doesn't change. I trust who you are, who you say you are. And I think that was the first time I really just was broken and all in,
And raw and open and ready to receive.
ready to receive. As soon as I said that prayer, I start the Jeep, start driving home. The phone rings, and it's my wife. She's down in Florida now. And she's like, hey, I think you need to fly down there and we need to talk. And so it started this journey of the Lord healing the hurts that were in me. It took a long time in counseling, marriage counseling, but also I took a lot of spiritual lay counseling. And I was in Asheville with my wife. We were at this conference led by Larry Crabb, and it was for spiritual development. And there was one of the exercises was, we were in little small groups. It was not with my wife. Is to think about a time when you were the happiest. Like, ask the Lord to show you in your mind the images of you when you had the happiest moment of your life. And so I remember, just praying, and I had this image of being in College Station in my girlfriend's apartment at the time, that Texas Aggie. My head was resting in her lap. She thought I was asleep. She was talking to her girlfriend, and she said, yeah, I think I love him. And the words, I love him, was what I just remember thinking, wow, I'm loved. Now it turns out she didn't love me, but that's a whole different thing. And then, part of the exercise also was to think of the worst moment of your life. Well, that happiest moment was represents your um, a false happiness, like human love and so acceptance was was my inner need, but that was a false acceptance, her, filling that. And so that was very interesting to me because I realized that I had very deep wounds. I had wounds from going back to even when I was a kid because I had ADHD, which I mentioned earlier,
Right.
where I found my mom's diary and she was writing in prayers into it that the Lord would heal her son and make him normal. And I remember reading this as a 9-year-old thinking, I'm making mom sad. I've hurt mom.
Yeah. And then I'm not enough. And
I'm
I'm broke.
defective.
Yeah.
I'm broken.
Oof.
So I carried that with me. And I didn't realize that until my 30s, right? And then whenever I got rejected so I was always seeking out the approval of women or others because that's what I desired to be accepted.
Right.
But that was false acceptance. And so I remember getting to the point where that acceptance really only comes from God and from the Lord. And so kind of rambled there, but he has healed me from that where I didn't need anything other than him. And then he continued to show me, there was this one time I was jogging. It was a Sunday morning. I got up early before church to go jogging. This is still when, my wife was down away. She'd already called me and said, hey, come down to see me, but
Right.
I hadn't gone down yet. And midway through this run, then all I hear is this word, 2 Samuel. And I'm like, okay, crap, I don't have my Bible and I haven't memorized 2 Samuel. So I run home. It's a 5-mile run. Open it up and it's talking about Mephibosheth. He's like the servant, in Old Testament times, King David comes in, all the other folks are now exiled. He self-exiles because he's the wrong bloodline. And also he's a cripple, so he's deformed, right? So in Jewish culture at the time, wrong bloodline, should have been killed at birth, was a cripple, should have been killed at birth. He runs away from David. David sends his men to go find the servant. He sees him coming and he thinks, it's time for me they're coming to kill me.
Right.
They take him back to David. David sits him at the table and says, there is always a seat for you at my table. And as I'm reading that, the Lord's saying, you're Mephibosheth. I can't even say it. You're Mephibosheth, right?
Yeah.
I have made you whole. You have a seat at my table through Jesus. So I'm like, whoa.
Yeah. He made you this way for a reason.
Yeah.
You're built. You're his creation.
Yeah. So I go to church that morning. The pastor preaches that exact passage. I'm blown away.
There's no coincidences.
No coincidences. And I realized Sandy was not crazy, that we do have an interactive Lord and Savior who reaches us when we are at our lowest. Well, fast forward all that. So going back to how the engineer that I am.
Sure.
Well, part of it was because I worked so hard, and I kept achieving, but I was also very afraid. So there came a point in time when I had an opportunity to interview for a chief engineer position on a degraded visual environment, brownout rotorcraft environment exploitation system, whatever it was called.
Yep.
I'm guaranteed for the slot. It would be a promotion. I was like a GS-13 at the time. This would have been like a 14. I'm given the actual interview questions. Right. Kind of.
Got the keys to the castle already?
Got the castle. The interview panel was a panel of 2. One of them was my boss. So I'm supposedly the shoe-in. I'm driving to this interview, and I start freaking out, this panic attack. And I put on the Christian radio right before I pull in because I'm thinking that's going to help me somehow. And
sure.
And it was weird because the announcer's like, if you're going through something right now, just give it to the Lord. Don't worry about it. I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. So I go into the interview, standard stupid questions, right? The way the government does stuff.
Right.
They're not the same questions, but close enough.
Close. Yeah.
I know all the answers. I start talking and I'm not making any sense. I'm not answering them. I'm rambling. And I hear myself. It's like I'm floating. I'm looking at myself in this interview and I'm like,
stop.
Like, what is going on? And so they're just looking at me like they stopped writing down. They're just like sitting back in their chairs.
They're just here for entertainment purposes
right?
At this point.
There they are. And so the interview's done. The last 30 seconds I snap to and I try to get 30 minutes of interview into like 30 seconds.
Right.
So I leave, and the boss comes back the next day, and he goes, yeah, that was an interesting interview. I said, yeah. He goes, we all have bad days. Apparently you had everyone in the world's worst day.
All at
I was like,
once.
he goes, but it doesn't matter. We're going to select you anyway. And I'm thinking, okay, well, they didn't select me. And at the time, I had been asked to interview with the Missile Defense Agency as practice. Because I'm like, there's no way I'm going to the Missile Defense Agency.
Right.
Because I'm still healing from this performance-based wheel where I'm learning that I have boundaries and it's okay to say no at work and that I can focus on family. But everything I heard about the Missile Defense Agency is like, they are the
Don't go
grinder.
there.
And so I need to rewind just a little bit. And so a buddy of mine calls me up about the same time I'm about to get this interview for this other Army program. And he's like, hey, you should interview for this missile defense job. Man, I don't want a missile defense job. You guys are a meat grinder. Forget it. I'm trying to recover from being on the hamster wheel of performance. You guys mandate that there. And he's like, no, it'll be good practice. Okay, fine. Put my stuff in. So I put my packet in for the Army job, which I just told you about,
Right.
in this missile defense one. Drive down to Florida for a family reunion with the wife, and get a call from Missile Defense. Now we're in Ocala, Florida, on an air ranch where my wife's grandfather had his planes with big hangar, tons of people. And they're like, we want to do an interview. And I said, yeah, I'm on leave until next week. And they're like, well, we'll just do a phone interview. And I'm like, okay. Well, they're like, we're going to do it tomorrow. Well, somehow, suddenly, I go blind in both eyes. Like, after that phone call, I don't know what happened. Scales appeared. I couldn't see. I'm freaking out. I go to the doctor. They're like, we have no idea. Maybe it's a virus. And so now I'm dialing into this interview blind, right? Can't find a quiet place in the house. And they're in DC. They're calling me from DC for this thing. And they're way more serious at the missile defense in this panel. And so they're asking me questions. And I'm like, you know what? Whatever. So I'm just answering.
Just let it ride.
Let it ride. And I'm actually asking them questions like, well, you can't do that. And I'm like, well, you guys need to think about X, Y, and Z. And so I'm just, because at this point, I'm like, whatever.
Put them on their heels, give them something they hadn't seen before.
So anyway, that goes, drive back to Huntsville, eyes miraculously get better. Don't know what it was. And go through the interview for the Army one, get told no. Then the next morning, I get a job offer from Missile Defense Agency for promotion to chief engineer. And I'm terrified because I'm like, oh no.
You're going to the place you didn't want to go.
And I remember saying, Lord, I can't go there. It's going to make me go back to how it was. And I remember hearing this voice. And it's like, I've already healed you. Now I'm going to polish you. So I took that missile defense job. They roll in there, and they are very serious.
Threw you right into the environment you were trying to heal yourself from.
Right into it. And they're freaking out. They're taking everything so seriously. And I'm like, why are we doing it this way? Why don't we do it this way? Why can't we do it this way? And they're like, we've never done that. I'm like, well, this. And they're like, and then 4 o'clock comes. I'm like, I got to go. And they're like, well, you need to stay. The Admiral wants blah, blah, blah. I'm like,
God put you in the toughest environment for you to be able to resist and rest.
He did. Well, anyway, long story short, I'm already on short final to come back to aviation, right? So I gotten a job interview. I was coming back, to be a systems engineer in aviation. And so anyway, I leave, I come back, and I've realized that I'm not really a good engineer. But as far as a classical engineer goes, I hate math. I hate programming, but I understand it. And since the Lord was healing those hurts in me, performance-based, acceptance-based, and replacing it with, he built me the way he built me. He created me with attention deficit disorder as a unique person, not as a broken person, that I don't have to prove my worth, that my worth is already ordained because of who he is. And I am a child of him, made in his image.
Absolutely.
And so that's coming with me. So I get this job back in aviation, as the chief system engineer for this 06 project office. I'm doing my thing. I'm helping. But I remember there was other Christian men around me. There was Colonel Frazier. He would come in, we'd pray together. There was you. I remember a time when you had a decision to make, and you came into my office to talk to me about
Oh,
it.
yeah. That was during COVID.
I said, "Well, what's the Lord saying to you?" And you're like, "Well, I don't know." And I said, "I'll tell you what this is. The Lord has not put me here because I'm a really good engineer. He put me here because he wants me here to be there for folks like you, other men who need him." And I remember you went down to the river,
There is a defining moment we'll talk about in another podcast
right?
of, yep,
And so,
absolutely. That was a key moment in my life for sure.
yeah. And so what I had realized is the Lord built me the way he did so I could be his light to others. So if you're struggling with being perfect or being good enough, you already are good enough.
That's right.
If you're struggling with, does the Lord really love me? He loves you regardless of what you've done. I used to think that, he had a plan for me, right? Because he says, I have a plan for you. And I used to think that I could mess that plan up because I did X. So now I'm on plan B. And now I'm on his plan C. And I had a good mentor who said, hey, isn't the Lord perfect? And I said, yeah. And if you're his creation, do you think that the creation can ruin perfection? I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, if he has a perfect plan for you and you do something to mess up that perfect plan, so now you're on his plan B, well, then he's not perfect. So how can that be? And I was like, Phew. He goes, so maybe his plan for you is the path you had to walk. And it may not look perfect in your eyes because you made bad decisions or you struggled, but you had to do that to be able to get into the right place with him. That those things are the crucible that shapes you.
What would you say to people right now that think they've got to get right before they can come to Jesus?
I would say you're already right. For me, the hardest part was that thinking, okay, now I've done something to separate my ability to talk to him. Kind of talking about like I couldn't share Christ with my wife because I felt I forfeited that. That was a lie that Satan gave me. I would sin. So now I'm going to pray about something, but why would God listen to me? Because I'm still a sinner. Well, he showed me is like your sins are paid for. Your past sins, your present sins, and your future sins have already been paid for by the blood of Christ. So there's nothing you need to do to become right with him other than accept him as your savior. That doesn't mean you're not going to sin. It's already paid for. And it's weird because some people will be like, well, that's just like a get out of jail free card. No,
No,
there's a weird responsibility of that because you'll find in that freedom of no longer do I have to do because he's already done.
that's right.
That weird freedom enables me to desire less of what I wanted and more of what he wants. And what I realized in my life is that the deepest desire of my heart is to know and be known by him. I want others to know who I am and be known, but it's really to know and be known by him. And so going back to that, do you have to do something? No. You just put it before him. It's already done. The hardest part is if we can actually do anything is accepting that it's already done and acting like it's already done.
Being able to accept his forgiveness,
Yeah.
that exists and it's unwaverable. So got another question for you. If you could go back to a moment in your life and tell the younger you something to help you as a man, as you went through all this, what would you go back? What is there a moment you'd go back to, or is there something you would go tell yourself that not that would change the trajectory of your life, but maybe, I don't know, adjust something or that would have helped you?
That's an interesting question. Often I used to think that I wish I could go back to younger John and say, hey, man, take your medicine. Just don't do that.
Sure.
It's going to hurt you. But what I've realized now and what I'll say now is I wouldn't change a single thing in my life. I would go through every trial, every hardship, every pain, every broken moment because those were required to bring me to a place of understanding about who our Savior is and how deep and powerful his love is for us. For me, that was that perfect path that he laid out. I had to walk the steps I had to walk to be able to be who I am with him.
Right.
So I wouldn't change anything.
How do you feel about your current mission, or what do you feel your current mission is in this world as a man right now?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'll tie it back to your first original question, which I never really asked about, how did I become the chief engineer for Army Aviation? It really goes back to that conversation you and I had during COVID, that the Lord has put me in the positions for his glory, not for my glory. And that I could be confident in knowing that I am here to serve him and I don't need to manufacture those opportunities. Um, when I became the deputy chief engineer under a really godly man, and he told me he was leaving, that I was going to take his role, I was immediately overcome with fear, the old fear, the flesh
Sure.
fear. And I remember telling him, I said, hey, man, I'm not as smart as you. The way you look at stuff, I mean, this dude is smart. He could look at architecture. He knows it. I understand it, but it doesn't come the way it did. And he said, John, he said, the Lord has always opened doors for me that I felt unqualified for. But what I realized was when he opens a door and puts you there, you don't need to worry about are you qualified or not. He's put you there. So don't be afraid. So when he left and I became this chief engineer, it goes back to I am here because of him. I'm here for the mission. That's secondary. The primary mission is to be here for other men, to be here for the workforce, to share the light of Christ, to share how my brokenness and pain was healed, how I've been redeemed, and how this position is not because of my works, it's because the Lord has put me here to be a light for him.
It's outstanding. John, I really appreciate your time today and your openness. I just pray that this podcast and this message will reach someone who needs to hear this, that
Yeah.
it will open their heart and an opportunity for someone to know Christ and to get saved. So thank you.
Yeah. No, you're welcome. One alibi, that's what I like to say in the
Let's
military.
go.
You asked about what my ministry is now. We get to be a lot around the warfighter a lot. Strong men, strong women, combat veterans. There's a lot of hurt under the skin,
Yes,
whether
there
it's,
is.
physical battle wounds, mental battle wounds, personal wounds with family or friends. And I really think that I'm called to come alongside those folks and share that even in the worst broken moments, there's healing. Even when you feel the weakest or the most powerless or forsaken, that there's a seat at the table. He's created that. There's a seat at the table. He knows you by name. And so part of my mission is to encourage men to embrace the fierce warrior, but also embrace the emotions and feelings that are underneath, just like Stu did, that big bear. He was a big teddy bear. So, yeah, I want to walk alongside other folks here and say there's more to it. You don't have to be alone.
That's right. And we're going to learn more about that as we continue to interview other men and talk about their path and how they've gotten to where they are today and the experiences they've had and how their experiences have shaped them and how Christ has refined them and brought them to the point where they are right now. So thank you so much for your time, and we will see you guys at the next event.